Behind me is the 2022 Chasing Cars EV of the Year, the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo. In the past on the channel, we've featured pretty souped up versions of the Cross Turismo, but the one behind me is the absolute base model. It's about $180,000 before on-road costs, so it's hardly a cheap car, but I'm here to tell you that this vehicle has relative value for money compared to other EVs. I know that sounds crazy, it makes me sound out of touch, but in this video, I'm going to explain how Porsche threw everything but the kitchen sink at developing the Taycan and ended up with a truly phenomenal Porsche, not just a phenomenal EV. And I'm going to tell you why I think the base model Taycan 4 Cross Turismo is as much Taycan as you could possibly need. More is always more, but this 350 kilowatt beast behind me gives you the entire Taycan experience in a great spec. As usual, we'll go through the interior, the boot space and the driving, and I'll also tell you how the Taycan performed on our new highway range test and recharging test, which you can learn more about in the pinned comment below. And before we get started, please hit subscribe and the notification bell. Before we talk about the boot, let's talk about the fruit, because the Taycan is based on a dedicated EV platform, the Porsche J1 platform, and that means that there is space here at the front, even with dual motors, for a Frunk or a fruit, as we might call it here in Australia. One of the ways you can get to it is via the key. Being a Porsche, whimsically, the key looks like a car, and for a few $100 more, you can actually get them to paint it in the color that you've specified the vehicle in. We've got a button here for our fruit. It releases like a old school bonnet on a combustion car, and under there you've got a nicely finished carpeted box, which is the perfect size for an airline carry-on suitcase. So nice to have a little bit of extra practicality here up the front. And we've also got the reservoir for your window washer and your emergency triangle too. But of course, most of the boot space in this wagon is around the back, so let's go there. If you're a wagon lover like me, the EV landscape is still a little bit barren. There's of course this Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo, which is just awesome, but not everybody has $200,000 drive away to spend on a family car. Over in the UK, MG sells their MG5 electric wagon, though that isn't coming to Australia. At the moment, I'm really holding out for the Volkswagen ID Space Vision concept, which previews a future Passat wagon, which might be affordable for everyday Australians. But if you do have 200 grand to plonk down on a practical EV, the Taycan Cross Turismo is a phenomenal way to do it. But it's still a mid-sized car, so don't go thinking that it's endlessly practical. It's not like a Volvo V90 or a Skoda Superb in size. The boot space is more than reasonable though, and it's easier to access than the Taycan sedan because the entire hatchback gets up and out of your way. As you can see, the cargo cover also gets out of your way. You've got some discreet netting, you've got a champagne bottle holder, you've got this case if you need to travel with your charging cables, but most people don't. We've got a travel charger underneath the boot floor as well, so you can probably do away with this case entirely. And we've got buttons up here to close the boot or close it and lock the vehicle. Plus those back seats fold down, and getting a couple of bicycles into the boot of this car is possible, though you can also option roof bars and a whole bunch of accessories to carry skis, snowboards, bikes, etc. on the roof of the vehicle. The interior of the Porsche Taycan is a special place to be in that the ergonomics are better than just about any other EV on the market, and the material quality is really high, as it should be, because this is no cheap car. It's positioned as a very premium electric car. It's a Porsche and it feels like one inside. But at least it's not an expensive car that feels bad. At least you feel like you're getting 180 grand's worth in here, plus options, plus on-road costs. Now, we asked Porsche for as lightly specified a Taycan wagon as they could find, and this is what they came up with, and it is pretty lightly specified. It's dolomite silver over the basic black leather interior, so this is pretty much how it comes standard. However, you will see a few options in the interior of this car, including some things that could probably be standard, like seat heaters and Bose audio, which sounds pretty good. But then you've also got some stuff this vehicle really doesn't need, like the Sports Chrono package, which puts this stopwatch up here on the dash. You can turn it into a compass, which I think kind of suits the raised and cladded nature of this vehicle, or you can just leave your dash clean, and that's probably what I would prefer. Speaking of raised and cladded, the Taycan Cross Turismo has air suspension as standard, which is critical, as we'll see when we take it for a drive to the ride and handling. But it also means that you can either stance the car really low, which looks like this, or you can jack it right up on its suspension to make it look like an SUV. Or you can have it sit in the middle, but I just think that's kind of funny. Now, as for the rest of the interior, we've got 3 screens in here, but they're nice and discreet. They don't sort of shout at you, and they're nicely embedded. So this central touchscreen here has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It's got nav, digital radio, and you control most of your infotainment through that. The lower screen is mainly for climate and also for some charging functions, and that works fine too. And then in front of you, you've got a beautiful curved display with your power meter, as Porsche calls it, speedometer. You can put a full map there. It's all good, and it's nice and easy to interact with through these clicky wheels. You've got a drive mode switch on the steering wheel too, which is pretty cool. Now, you can go to town in the interior of the Taycan with nicer and more interesting combinations than this. You can go for cream leathers, reds, browns. You can have a completely leather-free interior if you want that. And for the trim, there's aluminium, carbon, Alcantara. You can do lots of different combinations. Check out the configurator, it's really fun. Now, this car doesn't have a glass roof. Some people will prefer that, and it will keep the cabin a bit cooler in summer. So that's one thing to consider out here in Australia, of course. And as for practicality, we've got 2 cup holders here, okay size bin between the seats, bit of storage underneath this bridge as well, and okay size door bins. But it's actually the driving position that's most important. It's really low. The position of the steering wheel is absolutely perfect. The seat is comfortable, but not as comfortable as the optional 18-way seat, which is surprisingly affordable and the way I would go in my own Taycan. But still, there's very little to complain about here. It's a nice place to sit. As you might be able to tell from the exterior proportions of the beautiful Taycan, in my subjective opinion, it's actually not a massive car. It's really wide, so that gives it awesome stability, as we'll find out in a few minutes' time. But it's not super, super long, and so the cabin is really just mid-size. That being said, with my driving position, which is a bit further forward than some people's, I do fit behind myself absolutely fine. I'm 6 foot, I've got headroom. Remember, this car doesn't have a glass roof. I've got good leg room, and tow room is just about acceptable. Because this is an EV with a pretty big battery in a skateboard formation for this platform, that's what's sitting underneath me right now. And so it's pushing the floor up a little bit. Usually that's quite uncomfortable in EVs, and it leaves your knees approximately around your ears. But Porsche have done something about this by aggressively inclining the rear seat base up to support your legs, and that's worked really well. Once you're back here, you've got a few amenities. This car does have the 4+1 seating option, so you've got a middle seat with a seat belt, but as it comes standard, it's actually only 4 seats. I'd be fine with that, you might not be. But you get air vents down here, you get a flip down armrest, and in fact this whole piece comes down too. You've got cup holders in there, Isofix points, and leather finished pretty much everywhere. So it still feels nice and posh in the back. However, the coffin style rear seats do impede the view forward for some smaller children. Aside from charging, the running costs on the Taycan look to be quite reasonable, but we don't have a full picture. That's because Porsche still hasn't published service pricing for the Taycan, as the vehicle hasn't yet been in market for 2 years, and the services on the car are required every 24 months or 30,000 kilometers. If they have been published by the time this video goes live, I'll put them down below in a comment, but the intervals are at least longer than a combustion Porsche, and that's a good thing. The warranty on the vehicle is 3 years of unlimited kilometers, which is quite weak in today's market, though for extra cost, you can extend that warranty out pretty far for the Taycan with Porsche, which you'll want to do for ultimate peace of mind, because those 3 years are ultimately quite short. At Chasing Cars, we've developed Australian highway range and recharging tests for our EV reviews, and you can watch my explainer video down below through the pinned comment. The Taycan has actually performed the best out of the relatively small number of vehicles that we've tested this way so far, and that's largely thanks to a 10% range improvement that Porsche issued for all Taycans through a software update recently, which is pretty cool. And that meant that in our highway range test, the Taycan consumed 18.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers through its 83.7 kilowatt hour usable battery. Now that range is pretty decent for driving between cities on this continent, but what about when it comes time to recharge it? Well, it's there where the money that Porsche have put into the J1 platform really pays dividends. First of all, we've got a trick electric charging door, which is a cost option. You don't really need that. But behind it, you see the DC charging port that offers theoretical charging speeds of up to 350 kilometers, although it's software limited to 270 kilometers for now. That being said, recharging from 50 to 350 kilometers of range on the highway took just under 17 minutes for this Taycan 4, and that is really fast in today's context of EVs. That's because the motors are relatively efficient on the highway, and the Taycan has an 800-volt charging architecture, which lets it charge ultra fast. It's almost as quick to refuel in reality as a combustion car. The Taycan 4 is the base model Cross Turismo, but that doesn't mean it's a slouch, as we're about to find out. It's still really quick off the line. It doesn't have that absolute gut punch as soon as it takes off, like you get in the Taycan Turbo S sedan or the Turbo Cross Turismo, which are both part of the Taycan lineup here in Australia, but it still absolutely gets out of its own way, and that's what you would expect from the powertrain setup of the Cross Turismo. One of the reasons it's a better value buy than the low-end Taycan sedans is you actually get the 3 golden features of the Taycan as standard on the Taycan 4 Cross Turismo, and they're not standard on the sedan. Those 3 things are dual motors, which have come in for a real improvement by software update recently. They give you really good power, really good torque, and also additional traction in slippery surfaces. The second thing is air suspension, which endows the Taycan with phenomenal ride and handling, the ability to be totally comfortable, yet also incredibly controlled and compliant in different measures at different times. And the third golden feature that's standard on every Cross Turismo is the long-range battery, what Porsche calls the Performance Battery Plus, which you have to option for additional money on the low-end sedans. Of course, you can do all that. You can order a Taycan to your heart's content no matter what you want, even in rear-wheel drive form for less money in the sedan shape. But just ordering a Taycan 4 Cross Turismo makes it really hard to go wrong mechanically, because even in bog standard form, Porsche delivers a vehicle to you that is phenomenal to drive and that you'll be proud of to sit in and to drive every single day. So, what are the outputs from those dual motors? Well, in the Taycan 4, you're still getting plenty of power. 350 kilowatts of power on overboost and 500 Newton meters of torque. And the way I would describe driving this car is it's a bit like driving an electric Audi RS4, or perhaps somewhere between an S4 and an RS4 in terms of outright performance on the road. So it's absolutely no slouch in 4 form. Of course, you can get a Taycan Cross Turismo as a 4S or as a turbo, and they're even quicker, and some people will just want to spend more money to have the bragging rights associated. But as a 4, it's incredibly quick off the line in terms of rolling acceleration, but also in terms of how it achieves a point-to-point line. And that's one area where most EVs just are not strong. And the Porsche Taycan is the vehicle which is defining the ability of an EV to still be great to drive. And that is the heart and soul of the decision about why we awarded the Taycan Cross Turismo our 2022 EV of the Year award at the beginning of this year. It's because while most EVs are great appliances, very few of them are soulful to drive in any way, but this car is. The fact that it looks pretty good, has a comfortable interior, and is quite practical is all icing on the cake, which helped to advance its case further. But it's the fact that it's got phenomenal, clear, intuitive steering, loads of mechanical grip, even on middling tires like the Taycan 4 Cross Turismo, which just runs with Pirelli Cinturato P7 blue tires, nothing to write home about, and yet it still has awesome grip. And even the slightly reduced chemical grip means that you're able to move the chassis around even more in corners, despite the relatively high weight of the car. It is a joy to drive, in the best way that all combustion Porsches are. The spirit of that has actually been imbued into the Taycan EV. You really get the sensation that Porsche engineers were given a blank check by Porsche and the Volkswagen Group to make the Taycan as good as possible. They knew they only had one shot to establish the reputation of Porsche as a true EV specialist, and with the Taycan, that's been done. There's a few other innovations in the car that I want to talk about. The first one is the 2-speed transmission. That helps to make the vehicle a bit more efficient on the highway, and you can actually feel the step between the gears. It's interesting that not really any other EV makers have followed Porsche in doing this, so keen to see whether the trend catches on or not. There's also Porsche's approach to one-pedal driving, which I think Tesla fans wouldn't like at all. Basically, the car doesn't have it. There is a button on the steering wheel for recuperation mode, which gives you some gentle automatic regeneration when you lift the throttle pedal, but most of the time the car has no automatic regen. Instead, it sails like a combustion car, even more so than a combustion car, and instead the regen is done through the brake pedal. Props to Porsche on making the feel of this really natural. But you'll either be a person that loves the way the Taycan drives in this style, or you'll prefer the hyper-aggressive one-pedal driving of something like a Tesla Model S. And you can let me know down below in the comments which of those approaches you do prefer. Now, the efficiency of the Taycan used to be a clear negative, but that's been in part solved by that recent software update, which increased the efficiency by about 10%, which is a massive bump to issue through software alone. And as such, the highway range of just over 460 kilometers is totally comfortable for me, particularly because where I live, on the east coast of Australia, the interstate EV charging network has come along in leaps and bounds in the last 12 months. Though I understand that might not be the case where you live in this country or in the world, and that's okay. Lastly, a word on safety. It's pretty well equipped out of the box. You've got stuff like AEB, adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist, and they work nice and smoothly. There's also a clear 360-degree camera, which makes parking the vehicle easier, which is a consideration because it's incredibly wide. Look at the hips on it. They look great, but it does mean that getting it into your garage might be a bit more of a challenge than some rivals. So that's a review of the 2023 Porsche Taycan 4 Cross Turismo. We totally stand behind giving this car our 2022 EV of the Year award. Since that point, Porsche have made it even better thanks to that efficiency and range improvement that makes this car really flexible for road trips here in Australia. And it's the station wagon body style that really wins us over, making the vehicle more practical and, in my opinion at least, even better looking. Yes, it's expensive. It's an indulgence as a family car. But this is one of the best vehicles to drive on the road full stop, regardless of powertrain. And it shows us that there truly is hope in a world of full electrification, that you'll still be able to buy a practical car that rides and handles well, despite the weight penalty that comes with owning and driving a full EV. And that is something to cling to. Those are my opinions on the Taycan 4 Cross Turismo. I'm keen to know yours. Let me know down below in this video in the comment thread what you reckon. Would you buy one of these cars? While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.